All right, good morning everyone. My name is Tyler. I'm the service manager here at Janus. Today we're going to be going over how to adjust your valves on your 450 Halcyon. First thing you want to do anytime you're adjusting anything on your bike, your engine especially, is disconnect the negative battery terminal. You want to reduce the risk of any chance of that bike starting up. So it's a pretty simple process. Most of you know how to do it already. I'm using our Phillips screwdriver here, and this is an insulated one from Milwaukee, so it helps reduce the risk of electric shock. Simple process. And we're just going to lift this up and tuck it back out of the way to keep it away from that negative terminal. That's simple and done. Up here is where your valves are. These are valve covers, the little chrome caps. There's 4 of them in total. You're going to use a 24 millimeter wrench. And we just loosen them up. You should be able to get your hand on them after just a few turns and spin them out yourself. Keep an eye out. There is a rubber gasket on the underside of these rings. You want to make sure that stays inside this cap. We're just going to do this with all 4 of them. Check for that gasket. And we're going to come around to the other side and do the same thing. And this one here can be difficult to get to. There is your fuse box right here. So we're just going to use the open end of the wrench instead of trying to put the closed end over top of it. Try not to bump this as much as you can. Like I said, it is your fuse box. There's important electrical connections in there. And there's the ring. All right. Next step we're going to do is going to be to remove this cover right here. This is your crank bolt here. To do that, we're going to use a 10 millimeter Allen tool. Just loosen that up and it will spin right out. You want to try to keep the bike as level as possible to do this. If not, that's okay. Just keep an eye out. There can be oil that will come out of there. And this one also has a rubber gasket around it as well, rubber O-ring. So inside here, there is a nut that's going to be attached to the end of your crankshaft. We're going to use a 17 millimeter socket. You can use a deep well or a standard. I like to use a little extension on the end of the deep well to help keep the tool away from the engine case itself to avoid scratching it. And we're going to rotate this, and at the same time we're going to watch our valves up here up top. Now there is a second inspection plug you can use. It's this top one right here. You can remove that if you want to get the engine at true top dead center. There, you'll see one small notch. This is your inspection cover. This will tell you when that engine is on top dead center. Now you can see a small notch right here on the edge of the flywheel there. That's your first notch you're looking for. That means you're coming up to top dead center, but that's not the one we're going to go off of. I'm going to rotate this around a little bit more. And we're going to look for the other notch. Excuse me. It's very easy to miss. Especially if you're on the wrong stroke, it will kick past it. So there's your next number right there. You'll see a notch with a letter right next to it. It looks kind of like a T. I don't know if I can get you guys this angle. There's your mark. That's top dead center right there. Now if you're not precisely on that mark, that's okay. What we're looking for is to be off of the compression stroke, and that'll have no pressure on these valves. That's when you want to make your adjustment. We're going to do one more thing before we do that. If you like, it's not required, but it does help make the process a little bit easier. We're going to remove the spark plug. That will remove any compression on the engine to help it turn over a little nicer. To do that, we have a tool here. It's available on our website as well. It's a very specific tool. This is a spark plug remover tool for the 450 engines. It's actually made by the manufacturer. This is going to fit down in here. You're going to look out. There is a small acorn nut right in front of where the spark plug is. I don't know how well you might be able to see that, but right down in here, there is a small acorn nut directly in front. You're going to try to put this tool in directly behind that acorn nut, right onto the spark plug. Might take just a little finagling, but it will go down in there. There you go. Now we're going to insert the rod here straight through this hole. Might need to do a little adjusting, and then just break that spark plug free and just spin it out. You might not be able to get your fingers in there all the way, but that's okay. Take this tool out of the way. Now this spark plug is just loose enough. Yep, just loose enough. You don't have to take it all the way out if you don't like. But what that's doing is removing the compression from the engine, and it will allow it to turn over freely. Now we're going to take our 17 millimeter here, and we're going to rotate the engine forward. We're going to rotate it counterclockwise. You only want to rotate it counterclockwise because that's the direction the engine rotates as it runs. Do not try to rotate it backwards. So as we do this, you'll feel a little resistance as it tries to move up and down. You're going to watch your valves up here. Once you'll see them complete a complete cycle, you see this one just dropped. You'll see the front one then open for the exhaust. There we go. Now we have no tension on our valves. You hear a slight audible click. Now we're going to move on to actually adjusting our valves. To do that, we have two tools. We have our 10 millimeter wrench and our tappet adjuster. This is a 4 millimeter tappet adjuster, widely available online, but this is a square drive that's going to fit directly over that tappet adjuster. So to start off, your valves may be good, they may be not. Easiest thing to do is we're going to get this wrench in here and just break it free. You got to be very careful. It is easy to slide that wrench off of that 10 millimeter nut, and I'll just sit and spin it backwards quite a few turns. If you're doing this for the first time, it's a good idea just to back them all off anyways, just to make sure you get the right adjustment. Some of them may be loose, some of them may be tight, but if we're doing a full valve adjustment, loosen them all up, and then take your tappet adjuster, put it right over the top, and spin it backwards. Lefty loosey, righty tighty, the good old saying. This will loosen up your valve adjuster. Now you can see we have quite a considerable amount of play. It's a good base point to start off to adjust these the right way. Now obviously we don't want to leave it like that. So we're going to use our spacers here. Everyone can get these online. I have a set here that I specifically pulled just for doing the 450s. These are shim tools. If you look in your manual, there's a couple of different things that'll say in there. The adjustment you want for the 450 engines is actually going to be 4 to 6. That's not 0.4 points, that's 0.004 to 0.006. 4 thousandths to 6 thousandths. That's going to be for your intake. Your exhaust is 6 thousandths to 8 thousandths. Now, when you're doing this adjustment, you want to make sure the engine is completely cool. Any heat amount in there that's going to actually expand that metal slightly and cause your adjustments to be off. So with our engine completely cool, we're going to take the larger of the settings that it recommends. We're going to go with 6 and 8 on there, just because as that engine heats up, it's actually going to shrink those clearances. If you set it at the lowest setting, it's going to be a little too tight for you in the long run. So if we start off with our intake here, 4 to 6 thousandths, I'm actually going to take the 6 thousandths right here, and our tool has a slight bend in it, which will actually make it a little easier to get into that valve tappet. You can use them when they're straight, you'll just have to give a slight bend to it. So as we're going to come down in here, you're going to lift up slightly and kind of feed this underneath that tappet. If you don't have enough room, feel free to spin that tappet back out just a little further. But you're going to want to make sure it is directly underneath that tappet. Let's see, now I have my tool underneath. I'm going to take my tappet tool, spin it down to where it becomes finger tight. Don't force it. If you force it, you're actually going to be pinching this tool too hard. So now we're at finger tight and I have movement in here. You want to make sure you can move this freely. If you go to pull it and there's a lot of resistance, it's too tight. So we got our valve tappet tool right there. That seems to be good. I got some movement here. I'm going to leave that in there for now. I'm going to take this nut, spin it back down to where it's just snug. And while that tappet's there, go ahead and pull this out. Take your 10 millimeter right here. Hold that tappet tool, don't let it spin, and we're just going to snug this nut up. This is where having that tappet tool is really nice because it's going to keep you from spinning the tappet while you're snugging that nut down. There. That feels about right. It's kind of got to go with it. You shouldn't feel hardly any movement in that valve. You just want a slight click. I don't know if you might be able to hear it or not. And we're going to move on to the exhaust. Same thing, using our other one. We're going to use the 8/1000 tool. Slide that underneath there. Still got some play. So take our tappet tool. Rotate that down with that spacer under there. That lash tool. You might want to hold this vent hose up out of the way if it makes things easier. We're going to go finger tight and then spin that nut down. Once you get that secure, got movement in there, pull that out. Don't let it spin. And secure that down. There. Now, because remember, the back side, the intake has up to 6/1000ths, and this front one has 8/1000ths. So you should feel just a slight amount of movement, a little more than the intake side. Once you have those, that's good on that side. We'll move on to the other side. The same thing on this one. It's going to be real easy. We're going to loosen it up. And then get that nut, spin it back out. We'll do the exhaust. There we go. Not quite enough. Here we go. Spin the nut out. Give you plenty of room to work with. Tappet tool right over top. It'll fit on just like this. Give it a couple spins backwards. Loosen that valve. You can really see how much clearance you want to start working with. Makes it much easier. Same thing on this one. There's not much room, so your tappet tool might not quite reach all the way, but there's just enough to get a good spin on there. You'll see now we got a lot of play. Get your tool, 6/1000ths. You may want to take them off of the set they come with. I have 2 of them on here on a keychain. Works for me because it's an easy tool to grab, but feel free to take them off of there if it makes maneuvering around a little bit easier. We're going to slide that under the tappet here. Now we're in, we got some play. I'm going to do this one with my fingers right now. We'll get it close. And then spin that nut down. A little bit of play there. Perfect. Now I'm going to get that tappet tool back in here. Like I said, it's not going to fit perfectly, but it will work just enough to get you to hold it in place. Snug that down. That pops out on its own. And check. Just a little bit of movement. We're good to go there. Now the exhaust. 8 thousandths. Fit that underneath. There you go. You can see how you want to have a slight amount of movement in here. You'll feel it catch just slightly. That's okay. Let me take the tap it tool. Sometimes it's hard to work around with cameras. There we go. Snug that down, finger tight. Don't put a lot of pressure on it. Still got some movement, so we'll go just a hair more. There we go. Spin that nut down. Okay, I'm going to pull that out and use that 10 millimeter. Snug it up without letting that tappet rotate. There you go. Just a small amount of movement. So now those are adjusted. What we're going to do is take that 17 millimeter again, put it right on the end, rotate it over a few times. Keep an eye on your valves. Make sure everything rotates freely. You'll watch them move up and down. There's our intake. Here's our compression. You'll feel it kick over, and then you'll watch the exhaust move. And then there's the exhaust stroke. So now that everything's back up, everything's moving smooth. There's not any extremely loud audible clicks. Double check everything. Make sure there's play and everything. And we're good to go. At this point, it's a quick, simple reversal process. I'll put the cap back on. Start it by hand always. Don't use your tool to start off. The threads can be delicate and you don't want to force them in there. Might take a little bit of work. Just hand tight. And same with this one. Once again, 24 millimeter. Open end for this one near the fuse box. And you don't need to put a lot of torque on these things. Remember, everything's going to heat up and that'll help keep everything a little more securely in place. As soon as you feel that resistance to where it wants to stop, you're good to go. A little snug, and we're good. While we're on this side with those caps, we're going to go ahead and put this cap back on there. Start it by hand, and then take your 10 millimeter, spin it right in, and then this one, little secure. Give it a little tug. As soon as it goes to fight you, you know you're about tight. There we go. And come back over to the other side and do the same thing for those valve covers. Now that you know these are all on, we're going to go ahead and take our spark plug tool again. You might need to, same thing, finagle it in there a little bit. But now we're going to tighten that spark plug back up. Don't forget this step, obviously. You'll know right away if you go to start the bike and it sounds weird, won't fire, doesn't turn over. And we're going to move it around just enough to get our rod back in there. We're going to snug that up. Fish our boot back down in there over the spark plug. The boot, you'll feel it very tight, especially on the new ones. This rubber seal right here, designed to help keep it from grounding itself out on any of the metal components of the engine. It might take a little bit of work to line it up right, but when it does, you'll feel it and you'll hear a click. There we go. So there's that's in there. And when you push down, you'll be able to feel and hear that click as it seats itself on that spark plug properly. So now we're going to move on to the last step. Obviously, that's going to be attaching your negative battery terminal. So here we have the wire and our battery screw. Easiest to fish it right through the eyelet to start off with. And then I'm going to use my insulated screwdriver. You may get a small spark when you reattach that negative terminal, That's okay. That is perfectly normal. That's just the connection completing itself. The battery always has a connection. Even with the key off, there are electrical components that are still taking a small reading. So now that that's nice and secure on there, attach your battery back up, cover it up, and there you have it. Your valves are now adjusted on your 450. You can always give it a quick start up. If you want to hear, make sure everything sounds good. Now, being the 450s, kickstand has to be up, obviously, and the bike does need to be in neutral. We are in neutral. I always grab the clutch just in case. And there you have it. There you go. And that's how you adjust your valve clearance on your 450 Halcyons.